Please have mercy, I beg you!
The scent of the low districts, of stale wood smoke and poverty, was violently scrubbed from Rosa's skin, only to be replaced by the heavy, suffocating perfume of the Sunstone Palace. She was dragged not to a welcome, but to an interrogation room gilded in gold and dread, the sheer opulence of the tyranny making the air feel thin and sharp. Her simple, terrified presence was the inciting incident. When Queen Meghan, a woman with eyes as sharp and cold as cut glass and a smile like a polished weapon, stepped forward, the air thickened with active malice. Meghan didn't need to touch Rosa. She simply inhaled, her nostrils flaring slightly in dark satisfaction. "The purest scent," she hissed, the words dripping with calculated cruelty. "The perfect camouflage. King Jason, your little problem is solved." Rosa's unique, untainted Omega essence was a rare catalyst, now reduced to a tool, a living, breathing shield to mask the profound, destabilizing secret of Meghan's illicit, artificial bond to the throne. From that moment, Rosa was locked in the golden cage. Her duties were not to serve, but to suffer. She was assigned to the most menial, humiliating tasks in the furthest, dankest reaches of the palace, each one designed by Queen Meghan herself, to break the Omega's spirit without leaving physical marks the king might question. Rosa scrubbed ancient stones and polished ceremonial armor until her fingers bled, her core yearning for the rough freedom of the outer districts. The true torment, however, was the occasional chilling silence from King Jason. A figure of imposing, distant power, Jason would sometimes pass by, his obsidian eyes sweeping over her without recognition, yet his powerful alpha scent would momentarily spike with an agonizing confusion, a flicker of something suppressed, the painful sign of their forbidden, denied connection. He maintained a mask of cold indifference, standing beside his queen who reveled in Rosa's subjugation. He believed he was enforcing order and stability, utterly unable to see that the woman he chose was the source of his kingdom's deepest rot. Rosa knew her only chance for survival depended on enduring this oppression while searching for a single hidden flaw in the beautiful, terrible unity of the throne. Her resilience, however, was not only fueled by desperation, but by discovery. One bitter evening, tasked with polishing the marble floors outside the royal study, Rosa pressed her ear close to the thick, ornate door. Inside, Queen Meghan's voice, usually a melodic purr, was tight with anxiety. Rosa caught fragments of a panicked exchange with an unseen figure. "The ritual. The binding heart is weakening. If the king's Omega is near for too long, the truth will surface." The words were a dizzying revelation. Meghan's rule was founded on treason, and Rosa's pure existence was the single, fatal weakness in the throne's foundation. Her survival ceased to be merely personal. It became a mission of unmasking. Later that same night, utterly exhausted and scrubbing the filth from the king's private library, Rosa was startled by the silent entry of King Jason. He stopped dead, his imposing silhouette momentarily eclipsing the dim light. The physical proximity was immediate, crushing. The long-suppressed, agonizingly denied mate bond surged between them, a furious, burning river under layers of ice and Meghan's magic. Jason's eyes widened, a rare, terrifying flicker of primal instinct breaking through his cold composure. A sharp gasp escaped Rosa's lips as the intense, sweet agony of the bond ripped through her, mirroring the sudden tension in the Alpha's rigid body. It was over in an instant. Jason's jaw locked, his face hardening back into the familiar mask of granite. He took a deliberate, cold step back, the raw intensity draining away, replaced by chilling hostility. "Do not let me find you idling, Omega," he snarled. the lie heavy in the air. He turned abruptly and left, but the damage was done. Rosa knew he had felt it, the shocking jolt of truth, and watched him deny it out of pride and duty to the woman who had bound him. Her torment was now rooted in this devastating knowledge. She was not only fighting for her freedom, but for the soul of the very king who tormented her. Rosa's silent struggle and the king's terrifying denial of their bond did not go entirely unnoticed. An aged beta servant named Alara, whose back was bowed from a lifetime spent observing the palace's cruelties, watched the young Omega with growing sympathy. One afternoon, while Rosa knelt, scrubbing a stain Queen Meghan had intentionally created, Alara pressed a piece of dried bread into the Omega's weary hand, her voice a rough, barely audible rasp. The Queen, she didn't win his heart, little one. She took it. Alara spoke of the forgotten history of the Silver Moon clan, the king's true lineage, and the legend of the binding heart. It was a forbidden artifact, she explained, used in ancient times to reroute the primal mate bond through brute magical force, chaining the alpha to the spellcaster while masking the true connection. The Queen, Alara claimed, had never found the king's true Omega, but she had secured her political position through this powerful deceit. Rosa realized then that the conflicting pain she shared with Jason was not solely rejection, but the sound of his true destiny struggling to break free from the dark magic. The greatest plot twist arrived the following morning, disguised as a devastating new punishment. Queen Meghan, her gaze sharp and cold, summoned Rosa to her personal treasury. There, nestled on a velvet stand, was an object that pulsed with a faint, malignant heat, a heavy, ornate piece of ancient silverwork. "This object is precious," Meghan purred, handing Rosa a polishing cloth. "Clean it, scour it. If even a scratch appears, your family will pay the price." As Rosa's trembling hands closed around the object, a wave of crushing magical suppression washed over her, making the hairs on her arms stand on end. This was no ordinary silver. Its design perfectly matched Alara's description. The heavy, cold artifact, the binding heart, was the engine of Queen Meghan's control, the chain on King Jason's soul. In her cruelest act, the Queen had unwittingly placed the very weapon that could expose the treason into the hands of the tormented Omega. Rosa was no longer a victim. She was the keeper of the truth. The knowledge of the binding heart's true function ignited a terrifying, vital urgency in Rosa. She had the weapon, but it was inert, a silver chain without a key. Alara's whispers had mentioned ancient lore. Only the concentrated purity of a true Omega essence, derived from a rare herbal compound called lunar ash, could override the artifact's dark power. Rosa knew such ash could only be found and prepared in the deepest, oldest parts of the outer districts where her family still scraped a living. Risking instant execution, Rosa used her cleaning duties as cover. She found a small, broken section of a drainage pipe leading out to the common wells. Carefully, she scraped a coded message onto a sliver of soapstone, wrapping it in a piece of faded, district-colored fabric. A silent plea for the ash, instructing them to hide it within the lining of a delivery of coarse palace linens. It was a message of desperation, a choice that placed her family's life on the line. But she knew the kingdom's sickness would eventually consume them all if she failed to act. Meanwhile, Queen Meghan's composure was dissolving. She noticed King Jason's increasing aversion to her touch, his mounting irritability, and the painful suppression headaches that plagued him. The fake bond was fraying, singing a high, panicked note in her own alpha core. She knew the Omega was the cause, a walking contradiction to her magic. Meghan escalated immediately. Without consulting the king, she ordered Rosa stripped of her duties and locked away. Rosa was taken to a damp, freezing room in the highest, most secluded tower. Absolute isolation. far from the king's chambers and far from any possible means of communicating or escaping. "Enjoy the solitude, little mouse," Meghan sneered, her eyes burning with pure triumph. "The Feast of Unity approaches, and I cannot have your contaminating scent near my king until my power is made permanent." Jason, preoccupied and tormented by his own internal confusion, only heard the official report that the Omega had been moved for disciplinary measures, choosing, once again, to ignore the painful stirring of his conscience. He retreated further into his royal duties, avoiding both his cruel queen and the caged Omega, sealing his fate in willful blindness. The isolation was crushing, but Rosa's hope ignited when, weeks later, a guard, a tired, compassionate beta she had once shared a meal with, slid a folded, coarse linen napkin beneath her door. Inside, nestled deep within the thick folds, was a tiny, dust-like pouch of lunar ash. Her family had answered her plea. The Feast of Unity, the kingdom's most important public display of Meghan's authority, was tomorrow night. Rosa knew this was her only chance. The next evening, Rosa was scrubbed clean and forced into a simple, humiliating gown. She was to stand by the queen's dais, serving wine, the ultimate spectacle of her subjugation. As she was dressed, she subtly smeared the lunar ash, which she had mixed with a drop of water, onto the underside of her hand, right where she would be required to polish the binding heart one last time before the ceremony. The grand hall was a blaze of gold and light, packed with every alpha, beta, and subservient omega noble. King Jason, magnificent yet hollow, stood beside Queen Meghan, who radiated triumphant, calculated grace. As Meghan prepared to give the formal address, she handed the binding heart to Rosa, commanding her to place it centrally on the dais. Rosa knelt, her heart a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. With a deep breath, Rosa pressed the lunar ash against the artifact. The effect was instantaneous and explosive. Instead of the usual low, malevolent pulse, the silver object screamed, releasing a blinding flash of pure, concentrated omega energy. The blast didn't shatter the room, but it violently shattered Meghan's magical bond with King Jason. The queen instantly staggered, her face contorting in genuine, hideous panic as her power evaporated. King Jason, standing inches away, cried out, a choked primal sound, as the long-suppressed, denied mate bond flooded his senses. The truth, raw and searing, hit him. Rosa, the tormented Omega, was his fated mate, and his queen was a treasonous fraud. With the entire court watching the exposed, terrified Queen Meghan, Jason faced his ultimate choice: defend the lie or acknowledge the agonizing, undeniable truth. The sudden, agonizing clarity of the true mate bond ripped through King Jason, 1,000 truths exploding in his mind where there had only been engineered deception. He saw the cold calculation in Meghan's terrified eyes, the years of manipulation, and the pure, brave spirit of Rosa kneeling before him. The court held its breath, waiting for the Alpha King's primal rage or his royal decree. Jason raised a hand, not to strike, but to silence the fear. His voice, when it came, was low and resonant, carrying the weight of a decade of lies shed in a single second. "Treason," he stated, condemning the false Queen Meghan, who was instantly seized by the palace guard. The king's choice was made, the truth and the Omega he had tormented. The subsequent days were marked by a tumultuous but necessary cleansing. Meghan was stripped of her title and power, her treason made public to a stunned but ultimately relieved populace who had long suffered under her subtle cruelty. King Jason, finally whole and clear-minded, knelt before Rosa, not demanding submission, but offering repentance and partnership. He accepted the reality of their bond, knowing that its strength lay not in possession, but in the choice she had earned. The kingdom experienced the dawn of the true reign. Rosa, now queen, used her voice, once silenced and dismissed, to champion the marginalized, drafting decrees for the protection of Omegas and reforming the oppressive systems that had allowed Meghan's tyranny to flourish. She and Jason ruled as equals, their bond now a source of unparalleled strength and justice. The poor Omega who was brought to the palace to be tormented had transformed the tyrant's lair into a just and balanced seat of power.